Good afternoon. I'll call this General Service Public Works Committee meeting to order. It's December 13th at noon, and I am here with Councilman English. And we have 4 items on the agenda, and the 4th item is a presentation from our Finance Department and Comptroller Bonnie Jensen. So we're going to start out this meeting with welcoming Wastewater Superintendent Mike Anderson. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Today I'm presenting to you an item that the wastewater department wishes to upgrade, and that is our Scada system. In particular, this is the Scada system for inside of the wastewater treatment facility. So I'm sure you're dying to know what is Scada. So we love our acronyms. Scada is the Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. So now you know what that is. I'll explain it to you a little bit. So what it's used, our operators use it to gather data. We've got probably more than 1,000, probably about 1,700 pieces of equipment within the wastewater facility. So be it a small pump or a giant piece of equipment, it's all putting out data, whether it's on, whether it's off, how much is it pumping, all these things. That not only gathers the data, but allows the operators to interface with it. So it's that SCADA is that computer software that allows the operator to get in there and turn that pump on or off. So what we're proposing is to upgrade to or change out from our current system to this VT SCADA. We've actually purchased this software. It was relatively cheap. And we'll get to the expensive part here in a minute, but the purchasing of the software was cheap, installing it's expensive. This is what we created on our own for our collection system. So I don't know if you can quite tell. This is just a screenshot that I made of my computer. But this is on on a web browser, probably Google Chrome. But I don't know if I can say that on air. But this is this new SCADA package will be accessible via the internet, which makes it really easy to get to anywhere, using, of course, two-factor authentication and all those things that we keep hearing about. But this is an example of our collection system. So we purchased it, and we're able to build this one in-house because it was relatively simple. And you can see here kind of what we're looking at if you can. This is Riverside Lift Station. So all the wastewater that collects in Riverside needs to go through this lift station right here and get pumped to get back to the plant. And we could see here that it was both pumps were off. The wet well level was 4 feet. If it was actually live, I could click on this and go into more detail, but this is just an overview screen. So this is sort of what give you an idea of what it is that SCADA does and what it's used for. This is not ours, but because ours is not nearly as complicated, but likely will be. This is just an example of what you can do with the SCADA. You can see here on this portion here, this is a trend. And you can see as the, let's just say this was a wet well, the operator can quickly look at this and say this blue line here, it's going down. Well, that's probably because this pump came on, and I'm just using that as an example because this is just an example. But it would allow an operator to quickly get online and see, okay, I've got no problems. Very importantly, they could use it to interface with our alarming system, which is what we're having. Our biggest problems right now with our current system is the alarms. And I'll get to that in just a second. So what are the problems with our current SCADA system? It's unsupported. Our software version is quite old right now, and when we have a problem with it, we just have to figure it out. It's unsupported. We could update the version of it, but it's not just simply like downloading Windows 10 or 11 or something like that. It's quite a bit more involved and would require programming as well. In fact, of course, we looked at that. What if we were to stick with our current system rather than changing to a new system? And it was quite a bit more expensive. As well, our alarming system is separate from SCADA. So our SCADA system is one brand, and the alarm system that's, that looks at it and says, okay, that pump or that wet well level is pretty high. It's about to spill out onto the road. We're going to want to know about that. So that alarm system will call the operator, and as well, it puts out an alarm onto the SCADA so it flashes red and things like that. That's separate from Scada, and we have had problems over the last couple of years where we had to have operations on site 24 hours a day, which is not our normal operation. Normally, we're there 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. Then we go home. If that wet well gets high or that pump fails or something like that, it'll call the operator, and the operator will nowadays hop online and look at the Scada system. Well, if that alarming system isn't working, then we need to be there 24 hours a day, which we've had to do for periods of time, a couple weeks, until we were able to figure out a Band-Aid to get it working. So although it is working now, we don't have a whole lot of confidence in the alarming system, hence the reason we're pursuing to get the Scada replaced. Yes?
I have a quick question on that. So will there be staff savings then when this is fully transitioned and implemented? Because the alarm system will work appropriately and you're not going to have to be there on site?
There'll be monetary savings because that doesn't happen frequently, but that does happen maybe a week or two a year over the last couple of years. Thankfully, it didn't happen all that frequently. But yeah, when we have to do that, then we're paying people overtime. There's shift differential pay that we have to pay for that and whatnot. So yeah, of course. But more importantly, for monetary savings is just sanity savings.
Yeah.
It really is quite frustrating when you're trying. I mean, we've all had frustrations with computers. When you're trying to get something to work and it just doesn't, and you have to, oh shoot, the computer didn't work again, so I've got to shut it down and reboot it almost daily. We're having to do that. So it's, yeah, we've all been there where computers just aren't working. So it'll definitely help out with in that respect.
Makes sense.
And then, of course, beyond that, just environmental impacts. Obviously, we could have huge issues if something bad were to happen and we didn't know about it. So as well, again, to make things a little simpler for operations, the user interface currently is not uniform. So we've had this sort of quilt of a Scada system. In other words, one screen was made this way, and then 3 years later, we got a new piece of equipment. As you know, we've been here a lot over the last 15 or 20 years or 30 years. And as that new piece came on, it wasn't necessarily put together the same way, so that it doesn't look the same, and it's not very, it's just a poorly designed system. And as well, so that's the user interface portion that the operator's looking at. Also, sort of the behind-the-scenes code. So, not that I don't care about that, because I'm not a code writer, but I know the guys that do write the code do care about that. When they're looking at a block of code, let's say, it'll look completely different from pump station 1 to pump station 2 because they were just done at 2 different times by 2 different people. So we're looking to standardize all of that across the board. The new Scada system obviously will be supported. If we have a problem, we'll be able to call VT Scada, which, like I said, I actually have it in production. That collection system Scada that I showed you earlier has been built for a couple of months. We were able to run both it and our known good Scada in parallel. And then when we kind of said, okay, this looks pretty good, we'll transition. And now this one will start calling us, and we haven't had a problem. So that's sort of how we'll do it with the new one. The alarming system. So the new Scada package, actually, rather than being this older version that's probably 25 years old, will have sort of like as most things are nowadays, sort of everything's incorporated into one package. So the Scada will be there, the alarms will be there, it can run reports. It kind of does everything all in-house. So everything works together because it was designed together. And then, of course, as we build it out, we're going to make everything uniform and as streamlined as possible for ease of operations. So this planned upgrade will take place in 3 different phases. The first one is standards creation. We're going to involve a lot of the operators for that one. And it'll look at everything from the standard of, okay, this is what a pump station looks like. We'll put a pump here, a wet well here, or something like that. As well as that behind the scenes. Okay, the code is going to look like this. We're going to use, I'm out of my breath here, but let's say camel case code or whatever. That's out of my realm of expertise. But the code writers will make it standard as well. So once we kind of know our path forward, that's what that's coming up with. We'll do phase 2, and that's where H2E will be developing this application, and they're just basically on their computers working on it. As something gets put together, we'll test it out, but not where it's actually controlling anything, where it's just kind of looking, in phase sort of thing. Phase 2 will have several phases in it. And then phase 3 is the final system implementation where we push it out and get everything to work. We're expecting it to be done by the end of next calendar year. So it'll likely span the fiscal years. So costs, and I tried to break this down hopefully in a way you can understand, because it's a little bit wonky the way we did it. But there are 3 phases, as I discussed. Phase 1 is the sort of come up with a roadmap. Phase 2 is actually putting it to everything together. You can see that's the big dollar items here. And phase 3 is where after the program's created, it's pushed out. So base, what is base? That is most of the plant. That's where we're having most of our problems right now. We were able to break it down to where we can upgrade the bulk of our current system and get everything up and running as quickly as possible. We're suggesting to do that first, and then option 1, which, just for lack of a better word, we called it option 1, but that's to incorporate the TMF, which is our new membrane system. It currently runs on its own Scada system, and we have to remote in to get there. Again, not probably the best option. So we want to incorporate everything under the same Scada package. So that could come at a later time, immediately after the base portion is done. And you can see the total for that is going to be $92,000. And then option 2 is to integrate our centrifuges that we have. Those are what we're purchasing right now and upgrading an old belt press into a centrifuge. But that's the equipment that dries out the solids portion of the wastewater. It also is on its own Scada, if you will. It's on a standalone package, so we're going to want to incorporate that as well. And the grand total for this is $439,000, and that is strictly the costs associated with putting together and that's not including software that's already purchased. The software purchase was about $35,000. It was a minuscule amount. It's the behind-the-scenes guys programming for months and months and months at a time. That's going to cost us money. So this year we have budgeted $250,000, which would mean next year we're going to have to budget about $190,000 to finish off this project. If we can get ahead of schedule and spend more than, in other words, get more than $250,000 worth of work done this year, I want to do that. I would like to push forward and get it corrected, and then just approach you in the summer for a budget amendment. And it would be nothing other than what we were going to spend next year. We're going to spend this year. Okay, and with that, I would take any questions that you may have on this Scada upgrade.
Well, it sounds like, so going forward, you mentioned all of these different pieces of equipment and things, and they have their own kind of data collection presentation. And now, sounds like you're going to have to, with the stuff we've got, maybe kind of do some workaround so it coordinates with that. Do you anticipate going forward when we go to buy new things, kind of like if we were going to buy a new something as, if it's not Windows compatible, that you will, whatever vendor wants to sell us a piece of something, you'll tell them, well, it's got to make it compatible before we have to do a workaround after?
Sure. So most pieces of equipment, if we were to buy a new, something simple like a pump, we have the capability of incorporating it ourselves. It's really not that difficult. Nick Zito, who is our Scada engineer, he designed all this and put it all together, and he's more than capable of doing it. He could create a Scada system for the entire plant. It would just take 6 years of his full-time work probably to do it. It's just the scope of it. So if it was something small like a pump, we could incorporate it without issue. Generally, when things are more complicated, like, for example, we're considering getting a UV system for disinfection. UV can kill things, so we're considering using that for disinfection in the future. If we were to go that route, there's probably a control system for that created by Acme UV company, And it's usually better for those complex systems to stay with their program. We would just use our SCADA so in other words, we wouldn't mess with their behind-the-scenes program. We would just use our SCADA to look at it, basically.
Okay, well, I'm good, okay.
And I have one question. On option 1 and option 2, you mentioned they have their own SCADA systems currently. When they transition to become part of the new system, is there any cost savings with letting go of the old system?
No.
No, okay. Wishful thinking.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was already, I mean, it was, I'm sure, integrated into the cost of the original items. So SCADA is not really what causes something to run. I don't want to get into the weeds too much because it just muddies the water perhaps, but the PLCs are the computers that are behind the scenes, and they're actually what, when we purchased the TMF, they're what actually are doing all the work. The SCADA system is just what allows us to look into it and understand what's going on. So it's really just the interface.
Got it.
Yeah. So we're everything that they have done in the past, they've spent millions of dollars on, or hundreds of millions of dollars on engineering. So we wouldn't mess with that. We just kind of want our interface to be a little cleaner.
Makes sense. Thank you. That's helpful.
Well, given that, I would make a motion to recommend that council approve an agreement with H2E Inc. for replacement of a SCADA system at the wastewater treatment facility.
And I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mike. And on to item number 2, and I'd like to welcome Mike Becker, the project manager for the wastewater department today. Hi, Mike.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm not going to bore you with a presentation. I was pretty windy in my staff report, so I will streamline this process. I know this is a first, but thank you for the opportunity to allow me to present our request for an amendment for professional engineering services for our solids handling improvements project. A little history background. In August of 2020, we entered into a professional services agreement with HDR Engineering for the design improvements at our solids handling project. This was the first stage, and so there's several stages in this process, and the tail part of that stage 1 was last September. We actually awarded the contract to pre-purchase a centrifuge equipment. This is the same centrifuge equipment that Mike mentioned earlier with our SCADA improvement requests. We will be purchasing this from GEA Westphalia and should take delivery of this sometime in May of 2022. Now that we have selected a centrifuge, we know how to design around it. And so HDR is proceeding with our second stage, which we call Task 500 in our staff report. I've outlined all the, summarized all the different elements that are part of this next stage, which includes a final design, cost estimates, construction sequencing. That's very important. It enables us to build it while we're still operating it. We also need to have plans and specifications for bidding, and that also includes shop drawings and technical submittals that need to be reviewed and approved. For this reason, Task 500, which was included in our original staff report back in 2020, was set up. We just didn't know how much it was going to cost at that time. So moving forward, because Task 500 was included and we knew about it, we waited until we got the centrifuge. We know how to budget for it now. And so understanding that this is a multi-year project, we've already budgeted for this fiscal year. We will have to budget in the following fiscal year for the remainder of the project. It is worth noting that we will be revisiting this once we go through a contractor selection process as well. And so for that reason, you'll find that tasks 800 and 1,000 through 1,000 have not changed from the original staff report. HDR has been doing this project. It's an ongoing project. And so in compliance with Idaho Code 672320, we negotiated an amendment to this existing professional services agreement, and it is contained within the staff report. It is the staff's recommendation that we go ahead and amend this, that council allows us to amend this contract with HDR, and that dollar amount is $117,093. We do ask that this be placed on consent calendar because it is straightforward. It is a typical process that wastewater has employed long before I came along. And with that, I will entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions, Dan?
No, I think that pretty much,
Yeah, summed it up pretty well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Then I would make a motion to recommend approving the amendment to the professional services agreement with HDR Engineering for the solids handling improvement project.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we are moving on to item number 3, and with us is Kyle from the Assistant Director from Water Department, and this is a request for approval of the purchase of a 750 kilowatts generator for Western States.
Thank you
Welcome,
for having
Kyle.
me, council. Thank you. I'm here to council to get approval for the 750 kilowatt generator from Western States for our Atlas well. A little bit of history on the generators and well sites. So with the state of Idaho, they require us to have all our top 3 producing wells set up with generator for backup power in emergency situations. Windstorms, snowstorms, anything that you can imagine where we're gonna get power knocked out. So we've been working on this over the years, and got most of our wells and booster stations covered by a generator at this point. We have one left to do, which is Atlas well. Technically, we have one more to do in the lower zone, so we're trying to get 2 birds with 1 stone. So this last year, we've been working on a transmission line update along Atlas Road to get more water to the lower zone, which is the southern half of the city. The aquifer really doesn't cover down that well, down that direction that well, so we don't have any really high producing wells down there. So what we did is we worked with an engineering company to design that transmission lane, and then we're gonna set up Atlas well to either run to the high zone and the low zone, depending on where we need the water. So we're currently working on that right now. Part of that process would also to be get a generator set up on the site so it sets up emergency power, backup power for one of our top wells, which would be Atlas, to be able to run the upper zone and the lower zone. So we've already purchased the transfer switch for the well. With this site, it's an older site, so it's a little bit smaller. We had some concerns on whether we'd meet the setbacks, so we went to the planning commission and got prior approval from them to make sure we get the 0 setbacks and get everything that we needed covered to get this generator on this site. So we got that approved last year. We're working on the transfer switch, getting that scheduled to get it set up, and now I'm at the point that I'd like to move forward with the purchase of the generator. So as we move forward with that, we utilize source well purchasing, which is a government purchasing program. They already go through all the bid process to make sure that government entities can get the best deal on this piece of equipment. This piece of equipment is built with a 75 decibel rating at 23 feet, which is the best it could do. It's got a semi-sound proof enclosure along with a weatherproof enclosure. So it minimizes sound as much as possible in the area. It meets all the codes, and then it also protects it from the weather out there. We've also worked with the fire department for the fuel storage out there, so it's a double wall containment on the fuel storage if something happens, so we're covered on all bases. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Well, it sounds like you addressed, I was going to ask if we have to, like, expand our enclosure or building, but it's self-contained, it sounds like, the enclosure?
Correct. So the generator is basically a big diesel motor
Yeah.
with a generator on
Yeah.
one end of it to produce power, sitting on a big double-walled fuel tank, diesel
Yeah.
fuel tank.
Yeah.
With those, you can buy them just bare bones like
Sure,
that with
sure.
hardly any enclosure. But we get them with a soundproof enclosure that
Right.
CAT provides. It's built around it. It's got insulation through it. They're still loud, but it cuts down the volume way down. The exhaust is made a lot nicer. And then also, we like to keep the weatherproof enclosure, so it's got heaters in there, block heaters, so everything's plugged in, so we can fire it up when it's, 0 degrees outside.
Yeah, because if I'm picturing it going up, I mean, there are some houses pretty close at hand.
Yep.
Now, as part of this project, are we going to have to cut up and divert traffic on Atlas anymore?
No,
It's in there.
that portions of it's done. On a different stage, we'll be back to council, or actually Terry was already back to council for the second phase of the transmission project. That'll be just on the edge of I-90 right there, but no, we won't have to close down Atlas for any of that. We'll have to bring a big truck in there off the road and a crane to set it, but it shouldn't impact traffic. If it does, it'd be for a matter of just maybe a minute or two to get the truck off the road, but nothing as significant as closing down a road for any amount of time.
I'm good.
Kyle, I'm curious, what's the life expectancy of one of these generators?
So the generators rarely run. They only run in emergencies. We do fire them up once a month, usually run them for about 2 hours, do a load test on them to make sure they're going to run during an emergency process. It really depends. It should outlast my career here, but the problem is, which could be short, but the problem with that is with the technology changing, with the state's rules changing, they may require something different in the long run for backup power, but ultimately they should last 20, 30 years.
Thank you. Looking for a motion.
Okay, well, I would recommend the approval of the purchase of a 750 kilowatt generator from Western States CAT for the Atlas well under an open procurement agreement from another agency, this case Source Well, as allowed by city's procurement policy in the amount of $176,767.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Kyle. And our final item of the day is a presentation from our finance department, and I'd like to welcome Bonnie Jensen.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you some highlights of what the finance department does and what our responsibilities are. If you have any questions or comments at any point, please stop me. Let's start with the mission of the department, which is to provide exemplary service to our customers, properly record the city's financial activities, and to maintain respect, fairness, trust, and integrity. The finance department's main obligations are to safeguard city assets, maximize revenue, and provide accurate, timely, and complete financial reporting. The organizational chart for the finance department includes 8 full-time positions and a city treasurer. The city treasurer position is required for all cities by Idaho code and is currently being filled by Troy Timison, who is also the city administrator. The department is made up of a comptroller, accountant, a payroll coordinator, an accounts payable position, a lead utility billing specialist, and 3 utility billing specialists. Not only does finance have over 19,000 external customers, we also support our internal customers. As you can see, this includes every department in the city. Finance receipts all funds that come to the city, some of which filter through other departments. Finance processes payroll for all city employees and pays all of the department's invoices. The department also tracks all city assets and grants, as well as providing financial reports and budget preparation and tracking. This slide gives a brief overview of the larger functions of the finance department, which include cash receipting, customer service, utility billing, accounts receivable and payable, payroll and benefit payables, accounting and financial reporting, budgeting, the annual audit, special assessment tracking and billing, along with billing for the Downtown Association on an annual basis. The finance department processes all of the city's cash receipting for all funds and departments. This includes electronic payments, credit card transactions, checks, and cash. Payments are received in person, through the mail, and also through the city's websites, as well as electronically. Some things that can be paid for online include recreation programs, park reservations, cemetery lots, building permits, business licenses, and utility payments. All of these payments, whether in person, through the mail, or online, are processed and recorded to the correct revenue line items by the finance department. Each day, these entries are balanced to the cash and checks that have been collected and a bank deposit is completed. Electronic files are also balanced daily to the bank and also to the postings in the financial software. Customer service is a very important part of what the finance department does, and our goal is to provide exceptional customer service. I believe our team is very good at this. With the exception of various renters, the majority of Coeur d'Alene's residents will need to speak to someone in the finance department at some point, usually when they set up their water, sewer, and garbage services. Citizens' interactions with finance may be the only interaction they ever have with the city, making it imperative that this be a positive experience. The finance department receives 600-plus phone calls a week and has over 100 in-person contacts. Electronic payment files of over 4,000 transactions are processed monthly, along with 5,200 credit card transactions, 8,000 checks, and 400 cash payments. Next up is the utility billing function. The finance department bills monthly for water, sewer, garbage, streetlights, and drainage. Over 19,000 bills are generated and mailed each month. Late notices are sent out when accounts remain unpaid, and the city averages 11,000 late letters a year. If invoices still remain unpaid, eventually doors are tagged by the water department. The finance department generates 4,000 plus door tags a year, and on average, 10 customers a month are sent to collections. The ability to disconnect water for non-payment keeps the city's uncollected accounts at approximately 1/3 of 1%. So we don't have much trouble with people not paying their bills. The utility billing function also completes over 3,000 work orders a year for final reads, to check on meters, check meter reads, for inspection and or repairs, to turn on or off irrigation meters, and various other issues. Over 1,400 homeownership changes are processed a year also. The accounts payable function. All city purchases are processed and recorded through the finance department's accounts payable, which touches every invoice and verifies proper authorization and audits for reasonableness. AP processes approximately 1,700 invoices a month. Purchases are also made using purchasing cards, which we call P cards. The AP position is responsible for verifying every P card purchase, obtaining proper documentation, and balancing charges to the monthly statement. This position also maintains the P-Card portal with Bank of America and trains other city employees on how to use it. The accounts payable position is also responsible for tracking the city's fleet and buildings and contents for insurance purposes. A big part of this position is ensuring that departments are adhering to the state and city's procurement statutes and policies, and also the city's travel policy. AP generates and audits the city's annual 1099 reporting to the IRS and guarantees W-9 compliance for every city vendor. I didn't put a slide up for accounts receivable, but the finance department also maintains the accounts receivable module, which includes the annual billing for the Downtown Association, bulk water billings for the water department, cemetery purchases, and local improvement district billings. Payroll. The payroll process is bi-monthly and includes full-time benefited employees, some of who are salaried and some who are hourly, and also all the part-time positions. The payroll position also reconciles reports and pays employees benefits such as PERS, FICA, Medicare, insurances, which include health, dental, life, and disability. The city offers numerous payroll deductions for employees that also need to be reconciled and paid, including federal and state income taxes, 401k and 457 contributions, a cafeteria plan, AFLAC, employee-paid life insurance, and association and union dues. Payroll and HR are currently working to bring an employee self-serve portal online that will allow employees to access their pay stubs as well as W-2s and make changes to their withholdings, among other things.
Question?
Accounting, did you have a question?
Oh,
No.
I do.
Oh, go
Yep,
ahead. Oh,
yep.
sorry. Yeah.
That last part, actually, I was going to ask on that, because that's been something I've, kind of wondered and tracked for a while. Part of the county before, and then NIC had it, and it's a wonderful thing for employees to be, they're going to get their, refinance their house, get a mortgage, and they didn't keep their last two pay stubs, be able to produce that. I'm guessing it's going to save our time, so I guess more than just a general, that we're heading that direction. Where are we, and what support do you need to make it happen?
We are almost ready to go live on it, actually.
Okay.
We have a meeting, I believe, this week with the software company, and I think it's all set to go, and then we'll be able to start sending out emails for the directions to how to access the portal, and I am actually already on the portal, and everything seems to be there and looks good.
Great, great. And on Percy, if you're a Percy person getting stuff, you can go in yourself and kind of adjust your, how much federal, state withholding you want. I know, I mean, that whole withholding thing has gotten, on one hand, they made it look more complicated on the federal, but still, bottom line, if you kind of know, next year I better have, 11% held out of Fed. I mean, is it going to have the ability for employees to adjust as they go along their withholding?
Correct, it does. You have to, though, go to the new IRS standards and adjust in that respect. You can't just say married into like in the past, but it will also
No,
have a
but I
link.
mean, for instance, as an example, you can go in and just say, I want X amount, either X amount, percentage, or dollar figure withheld on federal or state taxes.
Correct, yes, and it'll have a link to go to the federal website, which gives you the forms to try to figure out what you should be claiming also.
Right,
which
if
I
you
think-
need to, yeah.
which would be super helpful.
Okay, then I guess the only other thing in there, which I've also kind of half joking asked before, but not necessary. But I mean, when you say employees can do withholding for different things, and we just mentioned the utility bills. So when will we get to where we can, it's like, yeah, take my utility out of my paycheck?
Out of your paycheck?
Yeah.
I don't know that we would ever get to that, but we are working on setting up automatic payments. We're still working on that.
Okay.
But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later too on that
Okay.
subject.
Okay. And I
But
do,
I don't know
and
if
it is
legally-
good that the city, I notice, if I put my check in, drop my check off, and then when I go out and get in my car and look at Wells Fargo, that check is already cleared, so you're getting the money in quick, so that's good.
All right, let's move on to accounting, auditing, and financial reporting. All of the before-mentioned functions create transactions that flow into what is called the general ledger. The accountant and comptroller positions are responsible for the maintenance integrity of the general ledger. The general ledger is the foundation of a company's double-entry accounting system. General ledger accounts encompass all the transaction data needed to produce an income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statements, and other internal and external reports. Governmental accounting incorporates fund accounting, which is different than reporting on a single business with one general ledger. Governments tend to have restrictions on how certain revenues can be spent, and in order to ensure the integrity of these funds, governments have many different funds or separate businesses. Each of these businesses have their own income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statements. The City of Coeur d'Alene has 27 separate funds that it tracks. The primary fund is the general fund, which is used to record all transactions that are not associated with special purpose funds. The city's general fund also includes 15 different departments. The finance department prepares an annual budget that the city council approves on an annual basis. The finance department begins the budget process by sending budgets out to the various department heads. But before this happens, the finance department needs to compute the wages and benefits of each employee in each department, taking into account any expected increases in pay and projecting increases in benefit costs. 3 years of actual prior expenses and the current budget is also included in what goes out to each department head. Department heads will review and complete their budget requests and return them back to finance for consolidation into a preliminary budget for council review. The finance department will analyze all of the budgets to account for increases and decreases and significant changes to report to council. The finance department is also responsible for the city's annual audit. The city is required by state code to have an outside audit firm perform an annual audit of the city's financial statements. This is a long process that usually begins in October and is not completed until mid-March. The city also is required to have a federal single audit done each year. A federal single audit is required by the federal government when an agency spends more than $750,000 of federal funds in 1 year, regardless of whether those federally sourced funds come directly from the federal government or are passed through the state or another local government, like possibly the county. The Finance Department also tracks, reports, and pays the city's debt. The city currently has 2 general obligation bonds outstanding at the current amount of $3.3 million that will mature in August of 2025. The wastewater department currently has 2 revenue bonds in the amount of $34 million. This month, the city closed on a refunding of 3 wastewater debt issues that will save the wastewater department just under $4.4 million over the next 12 years. The Finance Department tracks and reports the city's fixed assets each year for the annual financial report. The city's fixed asset policy requires that any item over $5,000 with a useful life of over 1 year should be capitalized and depreciated on an annual basis. Stephanie, the Finance Department's accountant, is also the city's current liaison to the Parking Commission and the Arts Commission. The Finance Department updates, enforces, and/or must comply with several policies, including the investment policy, the P-card policy, fixed asset policy, procurement policy, travel and training policy, and the records retention policy. We are currently working on a federal award policy and hoping to bring that to council for approval in the near future. We also must comply with generally accepted accounting principles and the pronouncements of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. Almost there. The Finance Department is responsible for various reports, including the annual budget and financial report, which are the 2 most time-consuming and detailed. Both of these take approximately 6 months from beginning to end. The state requires the city to report any unclaimed property on an annual basis, as well as the annual street report, which is required in order to continue to receive the highway user funds from the state. Cash reports and budget status reports are provided to the City Council monthly and are required by state statute. The newly created Employee Benefit Trust requires a quarterly report to the Department of Insurance and monthly financial reports to the trustees. And finally, the federal government asks the city to complete an annual financial report for the Census Bureau. Through the pandemic, the Finance Department has taken the lead on the CARES Act funding, which the city received over $1.7 million from to purchase PPE supplies and equipment, as well as IT equipment and software, and to fund an EMS position in the fire department. The city also chose to opt into the Governor's Public Safety Initiative to receive $6.7 million from the state to provide property relief. Finance is currently working with the other departments and the City Council to decide where best to use the resources that are being provided to the city through the American Rescue Plan Act. The city was allocated over $8 million through the ARPA funds, and you'll be seeing that again soon, probably within a few weeks. Finance, along with wastewater and the city administrator, recently worked through the refinancing of 3 wastewater debt issues. This was an extremely interesting process for me, at least, I think for Mike and for Troy as well, as we met with and provided information to numerous professionals who assisted the city in this process. This included a call with Standards & Poor's to receive a AA bond rating and watching online the day of the sale as purchase offers came through. This was a highly successful refinance, as mentioned earlier. Another recent accomplishment of admin HR in the Finance Department, along with the excellent help and advice of the Murray Group, was the creation of the Employee Benefit Trust. This was a time-consuming process as we worked through the requirements and approval of the Department of Insurance. Once approved, we worked through the recording and reporting requirements and have now implemented correct procedures for ongoing processing and reporting. The accounts payable function has also recently completed an audit of the city's W-9 reporting, as well as an inventory of the city's buildings and contents. Moving forward, the Finance Department is still working towards automatic payment processing for utility bills. This has had several hiccups as we've been working with Certified Payments, who is our credit card provider, to implement this process at a low price. The department is aware that other cities have brought this online, but it is an expensive process, and we are hoping to make it happen without causing an increase to customers' accounts. So I'm hoping you will be patient and we will get there at some point. We are also working to update policies and to bring forward a few new policies, including a grant procedures policy. The department also continues to update procedure manuals for the various functions of the department. And as always, we need to improve the cross-training of all the department's employees to mitigate risk and be better equipped to recover quickly from disruptions and to handle transitions efficiently and effectively. And that is the end, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Bonnie. Great presentation. And I just want to take this opportunity to say congrats to you and your team on that refinance. What was it, 4.4 million over 12 years? I mean, that's an incredible savings to our community, so thank you for all your work on that.
You're welcome.
Yep, I had mine as we went, so.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate all the time you put into that presentation, and I just don't think you guys have enough to do. It's perfectly clear that,
Yes, we are very busy.
yeah, very busy. So thank you so much, and please share our appreciation with your team.
Thank you.
And being that that was our last agenda item, I am happy to adjourn the General Services Public Works Committee meeting today. Thank you guys all for coming.